I appreciate a transfer story isn't what people will necessarily want today. However, yesterday before the game, Steinberg revealed that we'd made a bid for Magassa of Monaco. This was backed up by ExWHUEmployee and Fabrizio Romano as well. So I'm inclined to believe that we've made a move and that we have made a bid for Magassa. Price tag is rumoured to be around about 15 million. Now, Nottingham Forest were linked to him earlier in the window, and they've been linked to him again since our apparent bid. So we might have competition from Nottingham Forest. Anyway, it may not surprise you. Never heard of him. Don't know who this guy is. So I've decided to catch up once again with Sloth from Babbling Irons. And like I said, I know some people think, hey, transfer rumours, read the room. I think sometimes we've got to separate what we want with what the club want and what the club are likely to do. Ultimately, the big question is, do I think West Ham will sack Graham Potter, before the Wolves game? No. What do I think the club is most likely to do at this point? I think they're most likely to continue backing Potter in the transfer window. We've got 9 days left at the time of recording. I imagine their priority will be to bring in players that Potter wants and hope that he turns it around. I think he'll get after the international break. So we've got an international break after the Nottingham Forest game. I'd imagine he'll get that period and he'll get the games after it, and then they might have to sack him if he doesn't turn things around. But I think between now and the window closing, I think the board will be trying to get players in that Graham Potter wants. Magassa, at this point, feels like it's a player that Graham Potter wants. So I appreciate some people might think, don't back Potter, sack Potter. I completely get it. But for those interested in Magassa, you can hear what Sloth's got to say. And at the end of the video, I asked Sloth about West Ham currently. And it's quite sad, actually. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's chat to Sloth. Sloth, thank you very much for joining me. Bit difficult circumstances today. We arranged it yesterday before the game, and then everything's happened since. However, I still want to get your thoughts on Magassa because I've never heard of him. So I'd like to know a little bit about him, because regardless of what happened last night, it does feel like this bid is true, this bid is genuine, and I think that we've got to separate what we want with Potter to what's likely to happen with Potter. And I think it's often two different things. I think what's likely to happen is they will continue to back him in the window and hoping that getting his players will allow him to turn things around. Is Magassa that player? That's what we're going to discuss. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you, Sloth. Tell me about him.
Yeah, so Magassa is someone who plays at Monaco. We've been linked with quite a lot of central defensive mids from Ligue 1 in recent weeks. He is someone who is the first one is comfortable playing in the centre-back position. And to be honest, when he has played there, he has really looked good. The thing that I've said about this link is it's an interesting timing for it, because I think if you'd handed me this player or links to this player like 2 years ago, I'd have said, that's really exciting. He's one of the most sought-after prospects. And when he was playing for Monaco, he was making an impact at such a young age that I think everyone kind of was paying attention to what he was doing. The problem is this season that he's not played that much, but when he has played, he's been very solid. I don't think he's done or given anything below sort of like a 6 or a 7 in terms of his match performance. And we've still got to remember that he is only 21. So he's still very, very young. And he is someone who has all the raw materials to really become a top talent. It will just be about whether he can reach those sort of levels. And I think regardless of whether or not Potter is here, this is the sort of player where it makes more sense than chasing after someone like Brownhill, because this is a player who has shown that they could potentially be making a difference for a Champions League level club, not just potentially settling into a Premier League bottom half club. He's someone who I think has a lot of potential, has played less in the last season or so, but as I mentioned, the raw basics, they're there for him to really go forward and excel and make a difference to this side, because as I mentioned, he's the only real central defensive mid that we've been linked with in recent weeks that can actually play in that centre-back role. And if there's one thing we need at the moment, it is a bit of solidity in that defence. And he definitely offers that, even for just a really young player. He will give you work rate, he will give you that bit of tenacity and power as well. That's another thing. For a young player, he is incredibly physically imposing, and he's got that sort of long-legged frame that just means he appears to be able to make a challenge from way further back than you would expect him to. So I think this is a really positive link. It's not necessarily one that I would have picked. It's not the one that I'm the most excited about, but I do really like him as a player. And I think, as I mentioned, the sky's kind of the limit. It's how he chooses to apply himself. And if he works hard, I think he can really be a Champions League level midfielder or centre back. But it's going to be a question of, can he reach that?
When you said when he broke through, everyone's eyes on him and he was a big prospect, where did he break through in terms of position? Was it as a centre back or as a defensive midfielder or a central midfielder?
So central defensive mid is where he broke through.
Okay.
He's only really played maybe 15 games or so at that centre back position, but when he has played there, he has done a really good job. And I know we've been linked with Cristanza Suche, and people are kind of a bit thrown by the fact that he is so versatile. I'd say that it's a similar situation here. He's been asked to play there, and he is giving his all when he is playing there. The difference is that Magassa, is really composed in that centre-back position. It's not a case of he's been asked to play up front, so he's giving 100% while he is playing up front. It's a case of he understands where he should be, his positioning, and he is far more composed in aerial duels in a defensive sense than, say, trying to win a header to knock it onto someone, which he can do, but it's just a case of it's not as much of his remit. It's more a case that when he's been asked to play there, he understands what to do. It's not as dramatic of a change, and I think he's looked really comfortable when he has been asked to play there.
You mentioned he hasn't played that much this season has just passed, and I appreciate he's only 21 and that may be the answer, but what is the answer? What's the reason as to why his game time's been somewhat limited?
It's just because they've had the Swiss midfielder, who we were also linked with a couple of years ago, who was at Chelsea, and his name always...
Zakaria.
That's it. Yeah, Dennis Zakaria, which is one of my favourite contrasting names.
Yeah.
Zakaria has been absolutely fantastic for Monaco, and I'll be honest, I don't think many people would have gotten that side ahead of him. He's been imperious for them. And Magassa, again, as I said, just a young player. He's got an established professional who's a bit more experienced and got that bit more nous in the game. That's one thing that I think Magassa really has to improve, just the kind of finer details and knowing when to carry the ball, knowing when to take those extra touches. That's something that Zakaria just doesn't, you don't have to worry about with him. He will completely cover ground and then give it out wide to your wingers. He's not going to mess about on the ball. And I think that's where Magassa he needs to improve that side of his game a bit more.
I've looked at his stats, obviously. Looks like a defensive monster, this guy. Like, his numbers are insane. He's in top 1% for, I think it might be interceptions, I think. It's just ridiculous. His defensive numbers are incredible. To be fair, in possession, he's not that bad either. It's not like his numbers on the ball or on the floor and his numbers off the ball are really high. He actually looks really good. I've seen one of those, I don't know what the terminology is for those graphs. Is it a plot chart or something where there's two axes and all the dots are all over the place? And it's one of them. It's like, oh, here's your defensively sound midfielders. Here's your players that are really good in possession, like Stiller, for example. And Magassa just on his own on the top right, which was good out and in possession. So going by a chart, I was quite impressed, Sloth, but football's not played on charts, unfortunately. If it was, the geeks would win.
I think what's important with those graphs as well is to really take into account the fact that, I mentioned he's not played a ton of football. I think he's only just played over like 1,200 minutes. And in contrast to other players, like Stiller, who's basically been one of the main men at Stuttgart, he's played substantially less football. And I think he is really impressive in that defensive sense, but it's a case of just putting it into context. And I think if West Ham fans expect him to come in and make an immediate impact, I think there is the potential he could do that, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there is a slight teething period where he needs a bit of support around him. And I kind of worry about that with the current atmosphere, but I do think he has all the potential to step up to the plate and make a difference to our midfield or our back line.
You're making me a little worried, if I'm honest, Slot. You usually come on and, like, we've done Suzuki this summer as well, and you're really singing their praises. It makes me quite confident and quite comfortable that, this is a good guy and he's going to make a big difference. And I appreciate what you're saying about, but you're using the word potential a lot and about how, we need to be patient with him. And I think what's worrying me is maybe it's just because, the Chelsea game was last night. I'm thinking we don't need a player with potential. We need a player that's like ready now. However, the bar at West Ham, and especially in that midfield department, is so low that actually you don't need to be the complete midfielder yet to get into our team. You don't need to be the finished article to improve our midfield. So I'm sort of, my mental gymnastics are conflicting here, where part of me is thinking, no, this isn't good enough. We need someone that's like going in there making a big difference, because if not, the fella's going to be unlocking his potential in the Championship if we're not careful. But at the same time, I'm like, all he has to do is be better than pretty crap, right? The bar is so low. Where do you sit on that? Do you think we need someone a bit more established, a bit more ready, or do you think he's better than what we've got, and although he's not there yet, he still walks into our starting 11? I mean, both can be true, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I'm trying to really put into context for people as well, just how little football he's played. He did play at the under-21s, World Cup Euros in the summer. Baby brain, but he impressed in the Poland game. But aside from that, he was kind of a bit average. France as a whole were, to be fair, but it's not really his fault. However, on the point of making an instant impact, I think he can do that. When I talk about the potential, it's because it's so high with him. He was, one of the real coveted players in Europe when he broke onto the scene for Monaco. So I think it's important to put that in your head as well, and see that when I talk about potential, it is sky high for him. It's just a case of he's already better than what we've got, in my opinion. I think he makes a massive difference ahead of someone like James Ward-Prowse or Guido Rodriguez. I actually think someone like Souček would be good next to him. I would obviously prefer a new addition, a signing instead. However, he is a big upgrade, and I think even going into that centre-back line, he offers you something that we have not seen this season at all, which is a bit of aerial dominance, physicality, and reading of the game as well. That's something that he is very strong in. You mentioned those interceptions. It doesn't matter if he's in the central defensive mid role, if he's in the centre-back role, he is always anticipating and getting ready to make a challenge, whether it's cutting off a pass or whether it's getting stuck into his man and making a crunching tackle. He's looking to do that and win back possession. So I do think that it's a very positive move. My worry is, as you mentioned, is he going to make a difference right now? And for a young player to do that, I think when we looked at players like Macau, Cisse at Rennes, I think they're players who would make an impact because we know they are specifically, central defensive mids. They're those ball carriers. We know that. Whereas with Magassa, it's a little bit more up in the air. Is he going to be a centre back? Is he going to be a central defensive mid? And what is he going to bring to the table? Because, as I mentioned, not a lot of football this season kind of raises question marks about that and whether he'll be able to deliver.
Yeah, interesting. You're still not selling me. I'll be honest with you. I think if we were in a position of a Nottingham Forest who are also being linked to him, where you've already got Soungoutou, you've already got Elliot Anderson, I think, yeah, get him in. That's good competition. He's on the bench, comes on in games, rotation. In 2 or 3 years' time, he's then ready to nick those places. Brilliant. But I just don't think, I feel like he's our signing for a settled team that's going to have an okay season at worst, and I don't think that's us. I think you're worrying me a little bit, I'll be honest with you. But this next question should sum it up, and it's a little bit of fun. Out of 10, how you rate, if this one happened, how you rating this one? 0, you're fuming. 10, you're buzzing. Where are you?
I still think it's a good 7 out of 10. I think there is one hell of a player there, and I do think with minutes we'll see that. It's just a case of, I'm a bit worried about him coming into this environment, and I don't think he has mistakes in him. It's not a part of his game that I'd be like, oh, there's this one flaw in his game that is really there to be exposed. That's not the case. It's more just, he's a young player, and I worry about any young player. I've already seen a couple of comments about Pop's performance last night, and I don't like that. I don't like the fact that any youngster could come into this side and suddenly they are thrown under the bus, or they're a bit of target for the fans. And I think, obviously your viewers aren't going to be doing that. It's not that case, but it can get in players' heads, particularly youngsters' heads. And I kind of worry that coming into this side, it would be a big challenge for him. But as I said, I'll bring you back with some positivity. I do think there is a real top level potential player there. I think at the moment he's got a lot of ability, and he wouldn't look out of place at a Nottingham Forest. He wouldn't look out of place at, say, the sort of level when we were pushing Europe. He would have potentially even rotated into that midfield. But at the moment, it's not even a question. He walks into that midfield.
Well, one more question. Not about Magassa, it's about West Ham. But before I do that, if you would like to hear and see more from Sloth, you can find him on the Babylon Irons YouTube channel. The link to said channel is in the description below. A West Ham fan channel, so go give them a subscribe if you have yet to do so. Sloth, normally we just stick to like the player we're discussing just because it's a topic of the video and stuff like that. But with what's going on at West Ham in the last 24 hours, but almost like the entire transfer window really, in the last 12 months, possibly. What's your take on everything happening at the minute?
It's a massive question. It's the first time I have felt such a disconnect from West Ham United. And I'm not one of those people who really sort of pulls on the heartstrings when I'm talking about a football club. It's not really my kind of thing. I sometimes talk about my family and how they've raised me to be a West Ham fan, particularly my dad, and spending time with my granddad. That's they're things. They're things that I hold dear, and I'm. The problem is that I've never felt as far away from those memories when I attend a West Ham game, and it's now becoming part of every game where I just think I'm not enjoying it in the same way. I know that is always part and parcel of a season, but I remember when we got relegated under Avram Grant, and I at least enjoyed that. I loved going to Upton Park, and I loved watching the games, even though we were dogs, we were terrible, but I loved it. And I'm not saying that just because I was younger. Like, it's always part of your brain where people go, yeah, but we were terrible then. I know we were terrible. It's just I still had a good experience going to games. Now, I'm very worried, and I do think that, like Rob Green said last night, unless we kind of get 4, 5 or 6 quality players, and I mean quality, not David Sullivan specials, not Brownhill coming in on a free, and whoever it may be, I think we're going to struggle. I don't think we'll go down, but I think the reality is it's going to be a really horrible season. I think the atmosphere is going to get nasty, and rightly so. And I think West Ham fans are at the point where they're going to start really turning on the owner. There are quite a lot of us who have already done that, and I understand why a lot of fans haven't, because they've been fed this narrative by certain media outlets that, oh, he does spend money, he does do this. It's nonsense. The same thing that so many outlets were criticising Mike Ashley for, taking out the loans, charging Newcastle interest, and doing that. That's exactly what Gold and Sullivan were allowed to do for years and years and years, and David Sullivan has continued to do, and he has made a lot of money off this football club, and he's not putting it back in. And now he's found himself in the situation where we could well go down. I don't think we will. I want to caveat that. I do think we will have enough about us to stay up. But based off the last couple of performances, I'm really questioning whether that will even be possible. And yeah, I just feel like it's a point where I'm questioning the West Ham that I remember, and I'm getting nostalgic for it, and I think this doesn't feel like the same West Ham, and that's really sad for me.
No, it's really sad to hear. You're not the first, and you won't be the last to say it. And I think a lot of people listening to you in the last couple of minutes can relate to what you're saying as well. And it is sad. I read comments last night from people on my review just saying I've been going since, and it's a lot longer than I've been alive. It's like 1975 and 1968, whatever. It's people that's been going for, more than my lifespan. And there's a couple of people saying that I've renewed my season ticket. I wish I had in, and it's one home game, and they're already regretting that decision. And it's sad, actually. I go through spells of anger. So last night I was angry watching the game, but this morning I don't really have any anger in me, Sloth. I'm just sad. I'm just sad. And I might get worked up later on. My mood will change later. I might get more angry later on. This and that and that, whatever, and I'll go back to being sad. I'm going up and down at the minute through the emotions between anger and sadness, and neither is a good emotion, and it's not something I especially enjoy. But when I hear other people's experiences, and there is a lot of sad stories out there for people, and I think they are really relatable, and it's not like it's knee-jerk, and it's not like, because I think actually if it was knee-jerk, those people walking away would have done it 9 years ago when we moved stadium, 10 years ago, whatever. That's when you could say, oh, it's a bit knee-jerky, it's a bit quick, but you can't say that anymore. They've given a decade at that stadium, right? So I feel like you cannot say it's knee-jerk. They've how much longer do they need to get before you agree that it's no longer like a reaction? It's not. It's just a slow decline, and it's just got to the point where there's no bottom. You're at the bottom anymore. And I think that's the worst thing. Someone said to me, "I think we've reached rock bottom," and I said, "I don't think we have. No. I think we can still hit that. We're on the way there. We're heading towards it. We can see it, but I still think there's still a little bit to go before we go bang."
I do feel it's a bit like the Mick McCarthy meme when when he's in the press conference and they're like, it can't get much worse. And he's just like, it can.
Wait till that final whistle goes in May and we've been confirmed back to the Championship. It can get worse.
I think what's also quite frustrating is, we've seen that West Ham had an open goal to progress. And it's not a point of saying like, we deserve to be in Europe, we deserve these things. It's not a case of that for me. It's a case of the way to make sure that we weren't in this situation ever again for a good long period, and to get us sort of cemented as competing for those European spots for a long time to come was so clear. There was a chance to really do that, and David Sullivan just has not even tried to do that. He literally just repeats the same failing cycle, and it's like it's like he can't fix a bike tire. He's riding a bike and he can't fix a bike tire. So every single time he goes, oh, I think I fixed it. He hops back on the bike. He gets about 2 yards and then he goes, oh, I need to fix that bike tire. I'll do this. And he tries something different. It ends up being exactly the same approach, and yet it still fails. He hops on the bike and he goes, this isn't working. I'm going to fix it. And he takes it upon himself to try and do something that we all know is going to fail because he can't fix a bike tire, but he still somehow got this delusion that it's going to work. And it's just beyond me. It's so frustrating to see someone so incompetent at the top of a football club.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Sloth, thank you so much. If you guys, again, Babbling Irons, links in the description below. If you've enjoyed this video at home, though, please do drop a like on it by clicking thumbs up, subscribing to Hammers Chat, myself and Sloth. Well, we'll catch you next time. We're linked to someone I've never heard of.